Okay, yeah,
you're looking great. You're looking fantastic.
Clean my glasses.
Could you just sort of tell a little bit of the story of Crystal Waters, when it started, and what your involvement was?
Yeah. Okay, I can start any time.
Yeah.
Okay. We started Crystal Waters in 1985 when the then owner Bob Sample approached me, and I had a trainee at the time, Robert Tapp, who's still living at Crystal Waters today, with two wishes. One, to find a way for a large number of people to live together legally, as we have approval from council. The second one, also to do a land use plan. It took quite some time to convince council, and that's a longer story, but it basically took 3 years of design, observation and design, and submissions to council until we had approval and people could start to move in. And so since about 1987-88, people been living at Crystal Waters, and it has steadily grown. It's still growing to the point where we today are close to about 250 people, and there's always a bunch of visitors there as well. I think the key was to be able to convince council that in a rural area, it is a rural village, as it was the right way to go. I think it was such a depressed, in recession area, as they were willing to give it a go. And I think the important point now is, as we fulfilled all the requirements by the council, and we still do, we pay council rates, but we are self-governing, we maintain our own roads, our own water, we deal with our own waste, we produce some of our own energy as well. As today, we produce more food as an eco-village than it did as a farm, and we are a catchment, so the water running off Crystal Waters goes into a catchment which is used for water for human populations, and is a wildlife habitat at the same time. I think to me that's the aspects which I'm really happy about.
Mm-hmm. And you said that there's a lot of visitors teaching programs. Could you say a little bit more about the courses you run at Crystal Waters?
There's a number of people offering courses about ourselves, such as ecological solutions. The programs we're doing mainly in connection with universities from the United States, Japan and Korea, where we work with these universities to provide programs from about 2 weeks, a little bit more than 2 weeks, 17 days, to about 7 weeks. That's the longest one we've done so far, which fit into their curriculum. So each of our courses is actually different. Each time we produce a new handbook, which is from a core handbook we put together, and it allows students to get credits, and also it allows the universities to have a place which continues in a way with education which they can't really do at university. And that part is mainly the hands-on aspects, but we do also teach the theory aspects as well, but we don't want to duplicate what they already done at university. We want to continue and see, in a way, a purpose for the theory, why they need to go and put their heads in the books, and then see how it's applied out in the field, in nature.
And you've been teaching permaculture since when, and how do you see permaculture contributing to a shift towards a more sustainable society?
I did the first permaculture course with Bill Mollison in 1979. I did the second one with him in 1980, and then I started teaching in 1981. So that's 26 years, yes. And I've been teaching continuous in that time, and some years I'll be teaching 10 courses, and last year I think I did 20 weeks of teaching, but more now towards eco-village design. I've passed on the purely permaculture teaching to other people at Crystal Waters, which have been able to turn it into an income stream for themselves. I see permaculture as a very important way of thinking, of looking at things. I think the observation aspects are really important. People often feel as, I'm not a botanist or I'm not a farmer, how can I really ever be good at designing using permaculture? And I think that's missing the point, as people still see us permaculture as being permanent agriculture, whereas it has always been much more, and to me it has always been permanence in culture. And by doing that, it has the design element, which is really important, the way we put things together. And it has an element of food growing, it has an element of spirituality, also probably Bill Mollison would try to deny that. I think a very strong aspect of spirituality, of social awareness, of structures like we see them around here as well, experimentation. But now, after all this time, I think we have come to a point where I see ecovillages, or the ecovillage design education, which we are offering as part of the GEESE, as an umbrella. And permaculture is an important aspect of that, but other parts are also important in that, like the economy aspect, I think is a really important too. Governance is an important one too. I think we have a pretty holistic approach, and permaculture is part of that holistic approach. I think mainly now with youth, and we do a lot of work with very young people, they haven't got the muscle memory, they haven't really got grandparents who can tell them what food really used to taste like. And I find that a critical period, as another generation, and the memory will be so distant that it can't be probably captured anymore. I was in Japan very recently, and a Japanese person stated that in another 10 to 20 years, 3,000 years of Japanese agricultural history will be gone, will be buried with the last farmers who still carry that muscle memory. And the world should be concerned about it. I know Japan is concerned about it, but it's happening around the world. As you know, my generation, I grew up learning to milk a cow as just us growing up, or planting a garden, or harvesting. All these aspects of recycling, of being frugal, was part of growing up in a post-Second World War generation. And I think that's being lost. So I think there's a lot of things at the moment which is happening, which we, I think, are doing by teaching these EDEs. We maybe not even quite aware the contribution we can making. I think a historical contribution.
Where do you see ecovillage design education go in the future? When, like, if you sort of visioned a perfect future for the impulse spreading, how would you see that unfolding?
I think we'll be getting better and better at what we are doing at the moment, and I think I could see this at this meeting we've had here, as I was involved in 3 programs last year, and I could see personally gaining experience in the growth and improvement. And I think that will happen. I think the next generation of teachers will pick up from where we have been going and will be more professional. They maybe have sometimes backgrounds which are more suitable to what we are doing. They maybe are better in teaching the material. Personally, I see a great need to strengthen this program, but also to lengthen the program. And what I will be working on for next year, 2008, is my plan is to offer a 4-month program, which will be, people call it an apprenticeship. It's basically a semester term for many universities, where students, and I'm looking on about 8 students, a mixture of male, female, north, south, at Crystal Waters, where we don't have to sort of leave off where it really gets interesting, as we really can do the hands-on, and we also can see and harvest the fruits of our labour, so to speak, as we can do designs and implementation. We can plant and harvest in the gardens. We can get into a routine where we can solve our differences, if there are such, as people can get involved in the day-to-day life of a community and see the dark side of the moon. I mean, it's not all love, peace and happiness in a community, and I think people need to be aware of that too, as they then can advise and enter into a life of being part of an eco-village with open eyes.
And how would you define design, and sort of if you speak a bit about the central role of design in both permaculture and the eco-village design education?
I would say the important point to me with design is as it is a product of observation. So I would never take it on just on its own as design. It is an outcome of observation and a feedback loop where we go and observe again and absorb really what we've seen on a piece of land we want to design. But design itself, I would say, as place and time. As the typical example I use in permaculture, people say, goats are bad. Deserts follow goats. It's sort of what we've heard in the permaculture story. And when we then look at it a bit deeper, we find goats can be very, very useful. I grew up in Switzerland and goats had a very important part to play in alpine regions. But it is the right place for the goat at the right time. So for me it's placement and timing, but as a product of observation. And observation in this example would include the goat is actually not a grazing animal, it's a browsing animal. So what will the goat do in the place where I put them? How long can the goat be there? And that is definitely true also in the case of designing human settlements, where we need to be more aware of what people's needs are and behaviour are. We maybe think we know, but we, I think, have to constantly be aware of that. And in many cases, in the situation of land use of human settlements, eco-villages, we find we know more about the carrying capacity of land for goats or cattle or sheep than we know about the carrying capacity for us humans. Hasn't really been a lot of study where we really know when is the impact of humans too great. When do we need to put a cap on the population? We know that some cities have a feel, to me, some of the big cities, a feel of internal decay. As I remember I was in Mumbai and walking from my place where I stayed to where I was working, walking past an older, not that old actually, man lying on a little platform where he was living in his last week. And I watched him day after day dying on there, and would leave some food or some water for him, and other people did that too. And he was quite aware as that was the process which was happening, but the system, the social structure did not exist anymore to really truly take care. And I think we have to be aware that there's a size of a city, even maybe modern cities, where it is likely to happen. And I think eco-villages are a good counterbalance to ease the burden on some of the cities a bit. And also, I think, make it maybe more acceptable and more exciting for young people to stay in villages like here in Thailand. When I go out to Thai villages, I find lots of older people my age and very young people. Where are the ones which are 20, 30, 40? Well, they're in Bangkok, or they're in Chiang Mai or Chiang Rai, working in hotels or in businesses where they can earn $1. They will not go back to the farm to live there. What's going to happen to villages? So we need to find ways where we maybe should go and ask these people, what would hold you back in the village? What would make it possible for you to stay in villages? In Sri Lanka, that's been dealt, I think, much better.
And while on the one hand there's the role of holding people back in the villages, do you also see that the eco-village design education curriculum has something to take into the cities to help cities transform or become more sustainable? And also, like, where do you see the role of mainstreaming, touching the part of society that at this point doesn't want to live in an eco-village?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, now living in a rural eco-village, I can tell you it's not the easiest place to build eco-villages. My personal belief is that when we talk about now 50% now living in urban areas, this is actually not true at all. A very high percentage of people now are living in suburban environments. And I believe that the suburb is an ideal place to eco-villagize, whatever we want to call it, because we have the infrastructure and water, energy is provided there. What we have done is many cases through town planning, we have taken a suburban area, a fringe area of a city, and we ripped it apart and we made it into light industrial, heavy industrial, into commercial, educational areas, and then residential areas. And so we've ripped our lives into many parts. And to be able to fulfill our needs on a daily basis, we have to bring in the water, bring in the food, we have to pump out the waste which we're creating. There's no cycles anymore, and we have to travel to and from work. There's this huge shift every day. And I think we should look at suburbia much smarter, as we can bring together our needs a lot more. I'm not claiming that we could feed ourselves in suburbia, but we could make a contribution. We've done tests, and other people have done tests too, which show that in a climate of Melbourne, so a temperate climate, or a suburban climate like Brisbane, it is possible to provide most of the vegetable needs requirement for a human on 14 square meters. That is very intensive gardening, multiple cropping, but that is possible. So now we can start looking at wasted spaces, veranda, roofs. So there is actually possibilities for food production. I wouldn't say we should grow rice necessarily, all that's done in Japan, in suburbia, or we should grow large crops of potatoes or wheat. It's not what I'm saying, but the vegetables, our daily vegetable needs, it's definitely possible to do that within suburbia. And it is possible with today's available technology to absorb the human wastes of the people living there within the footprint of that suburbia, in parks and gardens and urban forests and so on. We don't have to invent anything new to do that. With today's knowledge, with today's technology, we could do that, and in the process bring people closer together. There have been surveys done by Bill Metcalf and others which show that a very high percentage of the population would actually like to live closer together with a relationship to neighbours. But not necessarily in an eco-village, as you say. But I think we could create suburbia into something which has a lot of eco-village flavour to it and qualities in a suburban environment.
And how do you see the growing problem of water scarcity be ameliorated by some of the design approaches within eco-village design? Are there ways that we can better preserve our waters? And
yeah, I mean, I don't quite know where people see actually that problem. In my own house, I've got a roof area of about 250 square meters. Every time it rains 1 millimeter, I collect 250 liters of water in my rainwater tank. Now, where I am in a rural area, I can actually drink that water, it's clean enough. But if you live in a city and it's polluted, acid rain, whatever, and you cannot drink that, you can at least use it for washing or for showering or for many of the uses other than maybe potable use. You only need about 2 to 5 liters per person per day of potable water. That water could be filtered through ceramic filters, again with today's technology quite easily. Once then it leaves my house, it goes through a biolutic system which cleans it to a standard today, to a standard which would make it possible to use that water to flush toilets with it again as well, or wash your car, or very soon it will be possible to use it to wash your clothes as well. Or of course it could be used to water gardens or